Salam alaikum. Welcome to Kunafa and Shay, a podcast produced for HowlRound Theatre Commons, a free and open platform for theatre makers worldwide. Kunafa and Shay discusses and analyzes contemporary and historical Middle Eastern and North African, or MENA, and SWANA, or Southwest Asian and North African theatre from across the region.
I'm Marina.
And I'm Nabra.
And we're your hosts.
Our name, Kunafa and Shay, invites you into the discussion in the best way we know how, with complex and delicious sweets like kunafa and perfectly warm tea, or in Arabic, shay.
Kunafa and Shay is a place to share experiences, ideas, and sometimes to engage with our differences. In each country in the Arab world, you'll find kunafa made differently. In that way, we also lean into the diversity, complexity, and robust flavors of MENA and SWANA theater. We bring our own perspectives, research, and special guests in order to start a dialogue and encourage further learning and discussion.
In our fourth season, we focus on classical and historical theater, including discussions of traditional theater forms and in-depth analysis of some of the oldest and most significant classical plays from 1300 BC to the 20th century.
Yalla, grab your tea. The shay is just right.
This episode is long overdue, in my opinion, since it's about Nubian theater, and I am Nubian. It's about time. We talked about this in a previous episode, but our intro and outro music is by my great uncle Mazen Alaa, who is a very famous Nubian musician. Today, I have the pleasure of highlighting another very famous Nubian artist, my grandpa, Mohy El Din Sherif. In fact, many of Uncle Hamza's songs were written by my grandpa. I'm overdue for bragging about my incredible grandfather, but we will also be talking more generally about Nubian theater and interviewing a guest from Nubian Geographic, Mazen Alaa.
Since the history of Nubia goes back to the dawn of civilization, naturally the history of Nubian performance dates back nearly that long. Nubia is the area in the south of Egypt and north of Sudan, and Nubian civilization dates back at least 10,000 years. The Nubian kingdom, known by many names over the course of history, including the Kingdom of Kush, predates the Egyptian civilization and continues to today, partially on its ancestral homelands, as well as in the diaspora.
Marina says partially because most of Egyptian Nubia, including my mother's village, was intentionally flooded by the Egyptian government when they built the Aswan High Dam in the 1960s, which was the second major flood in Nubia due to the construction of a dam. And this second one was also by far the more destructive one. 80,000 Egyptian Nubians were forcibly displaced to government-built villages in Komombo near Aswan, and a whole people and culture was shaken. Nubians, including myself, are still reeling from this displacement and its dangerous effect on Nubian culture throughout this generation and the past generation. We've gone from a thriving culture growing and evolving on our indigenous lands to a people who need to focus on cultural preservation in the midst of a very recent diaspora and lasting threat to our culture and language. This includes the arts. Our guest will elaborate more on how the flood affected theater in Nubia. Very often you will hear Nubians talk about the old village and before the flood to distinguish one of the most significant moments in our long and ancient history.
From the little we know, largely through Nabra's own oral histories passed down through her mom, Nubian theater throughout history consisted largely of oral tradition in which folk tales were passed down matrilineally through generations. Nabra's first full-length play, Nubian Stories, serves as a preservation of the folktales that were passed down to her mom, Mona Sharif Nelson, and then to her.
Fast forwarding to my grandfather's time, I know from my mother that my grandfather and the other men of the village would create and perform original skits regularly. Both before and after the flood, men would get together and devise theater that had to do with local issues, the problems of the village, the market, the household, and the farm. They would rehearse at the local sports club and perform for the other villagers. My mom says that they would make these sketches since there isn't much to do after dark when the work for the day is done.
It's important to note that the arts are an incredibly important part of Nubian life, especially in the village of Abu Simbel, which is where Nabra is from.
It's true. I'm from the Fadicha tribe of the village of Abu Simbel, and Abu Simbel is known as the hub of the arts for all of Nubia. My mother says that this is because of Ramses II. Many of you may know about the Temple of Abu Simbel, which includes a temple to Ramses and a temple to his wife Nefertari. Nefertari was a Nubian from my village. In fact, her original name was Ashranda, which in the Nubian language means the most beautiful. It was a scandal that a Nubian woman would marry an Egyptian man, and it's still scandalous to marry outside of Nubia today, although that is slowly changing with the diaspora. Anyways, because of this, Ramses II built this huge temple for Nefertari in her home village to honor her family and people. In fact, it was the first temple ever built for a pharaoh's wife. So, to decorate these two huge and elaborate temples, of course, he needed lots of artists. And so many of the artists of Nubia moved to Abu Simbel to work on the temple and stayed there. And until today, Abu Simbel is where the artists of Nubia are known to be from. The documentary on Nubian theater that our guest will be talking about today is specifically about theater in Abu Simbel for this reason. And you'll find that most of the famous Nubian artists are from Abu Simbel, like my grandfather and Hamza.
So the men would essentially devise theater that spoke to the local community, which is also in line with traditions of Nubian folktales. Notably, Nubian folktales always take place in Nubia, unlike many other folktale traditions. Even though they might have magical elements, the setting is in Nubia, in some time and place, even back when monsters and magic existed. The sketches would usually include singing and dancing, which are regular features of daily life in Nubia, and most of them would be comedic.
One interesting element is that only the men would act in these sketches, and they would often dress like women. They would have sketches about the problems women were facing or marital issues, all acted by men. This is largely due to the gender structure of the villages at the time and the roles that men and women played. Women had a lot more to do than men after dark, preparing meals and cleaning and such. So that might be a reason why the men would retreat to rehearse these plays at night without women. By the 1990s, that changed, and all genders and ages were acting. Before we bring on our guest to talk about Nubian theater and the Abu Simbel theater in the village, I wanted to talk about one show that my mother told me about that she saw. It was performed in Cairo since my family moved there shortly after the flood and displacement. As our guest talks about, a lot of people hated the displacement villages, including my family, and they couldn't live there and they had to move to Cairo very shortly after being displaced. So they moved to Cairo, and my grandfather, Mohy El Din Sherif, continued to make theater and make art in the diaspora in Cairo. The piece that we're going to talk about was an opera, again, written by my grandfather, Mohy El Din Sherif, called Opera El Amel, or the Workers' Opera. It was performed at the Cairo Theater in the late 1960s or early 70s. It's the first, if not the only, Nubian opera. And no, Opera Aida absolutely does not count. And notably, it was also performed in the Nubian language. The opera was about the Nubians and their role in the development of Egypt and their great sacrifices for the advancement of Egypt, including, of course, the sacrifice of their homelands, which was involuntary, for the Aswan High Dam. Before the Aswan High Dam, Egypt was just seen as a source for material to other global powers. It didn't have any major factory movements. The dam, as a major source of hydroelectric power, led to rapid modernization. The opera introduces the Nubians as people who have always been hardworking. Then it transitions into them digging the fields and singing traditional songs. And then, with the same rhythm and enthusiasm as they sang the work songs in the field, the actors transition into fighting to bring Egypt into the modern world. This included their personal and familial sacrifices, but also their role in actual fighting, especially around foreign invasions, notably by England, Israel, France, and the US concerning the Suez Canal. The opera talks about how Nubians will fight anything that stops us from developing ourselves. And the show is very purposeful about making the audience aware of how Nubians are also Egyptians and that we know about our role in the development of Egypt in the modern era. Facts that many Egyptians may not have known about and still may not know about. The show had very communist, socialist vibes. It was very much about national pride, the Nubian identity as part of the Egyptian identity, and the role of workers in economic development and modernization. It was meant to empower people, especially Nubians in Egypt. Elder Nubians had a feeling that Egyptians thought Nubians were not aware of what was happening and didn't understand their impact in Egypt. My grandfather wanted to make sure to enforce that and make Egyptians and Nubians proud of the Nubian contribution to Egypt. And as you can imagine, the whole opera was just very epic, as my mom recalls. One very cool element of the opera was its mawel. Mawel is a specific traditional way of singing, kind of like the blues. It uses a certain note or rhythm upon which an improvisation is built. Mawel is an important part of Arabic musical tradition, but Nubians didn't have mawel. So my grandfather decided to make a Nubian mawel for this opera. A mawel always starts with Yalel Yain, Yalel Yain, which means, "Oh night, my eye," or "Oh beautiful night." My grandfather started the mawel in the opera the same way, but with a Nubian rhythm. Then the mawel fluidly transitioned into a traditional Nubian song. This was an ingenious dramaturgical choice. Through this mawel, he was able musically to illustrate the strong connection between Nubian and Egyptian identities, that they are one and the same, yet have their own distinct attributes as well. It also helped identify specifically with Egyptian workers, since they would be especially familiar with the mawel in the farming communities and among the working class. It helped all audiences know that the show was an Egyptian perspective, but through a Nubian perspective. To quote my mom, it was, quote, "a way to tell Nubians, you are part of Egypt. We can participate within what is enjoyable to Egyptians, but at the same time, we are still imposing ourselves as Nubians and what we are going through," end quote. When I met with my mom, Mona Mohy El Din Sherif, to talk about this piece, she was actually able to recall this mawel and sang it in Nubian. And so let's listen to that beautiful recording of her singing.
يا للعين صابرت هملت تسكو ولنو سنيورنو سدلالي قرنو كل يا خير كيرنا وذاكرنا كل يستعتي يا بابور كاكاد وطيارات من بالأفيق ودبابات من كل قوسو وطيارات من كل قوسو مصر اللي تاجنا شرطنا تاجنا لسه منما لسه منما يا سلام حافظاها خالص.
That was so beautiful. In addition to his theater work, Mohy El Din Sherif is well known for his songwriting, paintings, and published books, one of which is entitled Old Nubia, Stories and Memories, and it's available for purchase through Nabra and Mona's organization, the Nubian Foundation for Preserving a Cultural Heritage. As the cultural leader of Abu Simbel, Mohy El Din Sherif was a staunch advocate for the Nubian people throughout his life, and was a leader in most Nubian movements of the 1960s through the 90s, including the establishment of the Nubian Museum in Aswan. His daughter, Nabra's mom, Mona Mohy El Din Sherif Nelson, continues his legacy today as a culture bearer and artist, and we are so appreciative for her insights on his theater work.
Now let's zoom out and talk more broadly about Nubian theater, especially in the villages. We are excited to have Mazen Alaa from Nubian Geographic as a guest. Nubian Geographic aims to document the heritage, history, art, and languages of the native people of the region along the Nubian Nile between Aswan and central Sudan. You can follow them on social media where they post so many amazing photos, facts, features, and stories. Mazen, hi, assalamu alaikum. It's so good to have you. Can you first start by introducing yourself?
Okay, Mazen Alaa, a Nubian man coming from the third generation of Nubians after displacement. Um, Being Nubian, like, it's kind of weight that you hold in your shoulder here in Egypt, because like you've been born with a cause, like with some rights that you are fighting entire your life in order to gain, in order to get your rights as any citizen in Egypt. And like our area is not well known with like rights for minorities or indigenous people in general. So like starting from day one, I think it is a burden that you have on your shoulder, and you're trying to make your life, your individual life better, and your community life better in a way that you can handle, or that your skills can help you to get. So, starting from like from my 20s, I think I've been active with like what we call it here with the Nubian cause, because you know that the Nubian had to move from the original land of Nubia, starting from the 20 of the last century, ending by 60 or 64 to be specific. Um, and the agreement or the promises came from the government by this time that when the water level will be settled, you're going to be brought back to your original land. And it's been like almost 6 years, and none of these promises are fulfilled. And that's why that generation after generation, starting from the 60s until like recently, the Nubian community have been always demanding for the return of the right of return, and it is a main cause for the Nubian community, as long as some other rights like uh, a diversity recognition of the Nubian culture inside the fabric of Egypt identity, and criminalizing that discrimination based on color, background, or any other classification. So during my 20, like few years before the revolution, 2011, I was a part of the Nubian the Nubian Youth Democratic Association, that was a part of the political movement in Egypt, try to make change and overthrow Mubarak. Um, like few years later, Mubarak was stepped down as authority, and like as most of Egyptian like this time, like we thought, okay, that is like a new beginning for our country, and it's time for every group, like religious group or ethnic group or any other people coming from like non-coming background, to gain its right, like for Christians, for people who follow some other religions, some people coming from some different cultures. It was a time for us. We saw that it is a time for every single citizen in Egypt to gain the right. But as you may follow what happened after revolution, like the old regime regains the power in some sorts, in some way. So after the Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi came, we continued the struggle in some other way. And it was just 1 year, I think, Muhammad Morsi was in power. So after that came some transitional period between Muhammad Morsi and the election of Sisi. So in this particular period, we were succeeded to have our first representative in the community of constitutions information of the constitution. So we saw that if you're willing to build a new country, you have to work with the basic, and the basic was constitution that will define what is citizenship and what is power and how this relationship between the one who in power and the original citizen. So we succeeded to have Mr. Hagag Abdul as our representative in the Constitution Committee, and he also was successful to have some articles that define our rights in the Constitution. And it was like very, very inspirational for me that, okay, you have been working in this field like for maybe 6 years or maybe more, and after that, like finally you gained some of your rights, but unfortunately after the constitution, the regime that followed the constitution is CC regime, and as you may know, it's not well known by following the constitution or any law. So that is basically like what I was doing like for the last, you can see 15 years. Uh, and being a part of Nubian Geographic is another way. Like if like there is no much freedom for me or for my community to trying to enhance our rights, so we switch it to what is like more safe right now, to trying to enhance our culture and our in a way that we can like work under the recent circumstance.
That makes so much sense. And of course, Nubian Geographic is in that way of uplifting a underrepresented culture is political and is a protest and is resistance in some way, but in a way that's very inclusive and is uplifting of our culture as Nubians. Can you tell us more about Nubian Geographic, what you do and how, when did it come about in that history that you shared? Of your work in the past 15 years, and also, tell us a little bit about the theater work that Nubian Geographic is doing now.
Okay, Nubian Geographic was established in 2015. Okay, I wasn't like in the first team or first group for Nubian. I was just like uh, a Nubian man who was just fascinated by this speech that have some, you can say, some scientific background, and like give us information about her history that is not easy to get from ordinary schools or from curriculums in a school or any sort of governmental way. So I was fascinating that like finally you have some kind of a platform that can provide us with some reliable information. Um, and like I was taken by this page, so I was like maybe like a top fan for this page, and I was following, and they were posting about language, about the history, the geography, or even the tradition. Um, and you know how we close as a Nubian community, so I was just like messaging him, and I found that he's one of my cousins that was running the page. So okay, so after a while, they offered, okay, if you want to post about like any topics that you want that fit to our standard, okay, you can do it. And I said, okay, for sure, I would love to do it. So I joined like Nubian Graphic like 1 year later, like 2016, and like it is a volunteer work. So sometimes you just like have so many to do in your life, so you just like get a little bit slow in your page. So the first team were just so busy with life, so it's became on me, and other people came to run the page, and yes, since then, I think we are like slowly recruiting some people to join us into running this page. Before, I think it was 2020, we have also a members coming from the Sudanese part of Nubia. It was great. It was a very nice chance to have our relatives from Sudan, and they are telling us more and more about Nubia and Sudan, that with a lot of information that our side in the North Nubia weren't aware about this specific information. And for the last this 3 years, I think Nubian Geographic had some more a solid turn to have some collaboration with colleges or university. Like for example, we have an ongoing project with University of Michigan in a project called Narrating Nubia, led by Dr. Yasmin Moll. Another one was University of California. It is more about the recordings, like life, recording some people who witnessed all the Nubia to share the memories and tell us about the landscape and every single details in the original Nubia. I think the Nubian Theatre is one of the latest projects that we have in common. It was a grant given by us from by an organization called Tandem Amouage, and we were succeed to get the grant. So we are working in the Nubian community theater documentation for the last 6 months, and I think we have a deadline in 1 month. So finger crossed, and I think it will be great. Because we know that we have a Nubian, or we had a Nubian community theater by chance. It was coincidence. We were talking with some friends, and we thought, okay, we had a Nubian community theater in our village. It's like, wow, no one knew about. So we digged more, and we succeeded, alhamdulillah, to get to interview the people who were like part of this community theater.
So what started your interest in Nubian theater? I know that the documentary will be coming out soon. You've done so much in 6 months. How did you start that project, and why did you become so interested in it?
um, Basically, what we know about the Nubian art is most music, okay, like songs, and I think that is the only source that known for us as a form of art that coming from the Nubian community. So when we know that, okay, we have some actors coming from not from urban cities like Cairo or no, but from the village itself, and you have a theater and you have people who are like paying money to attend the plays in the city. So it was like what like we saw that our people, and for sure the rest of the people, needs to know about that, and we try to like to have this community theater under the spotlight in order to encourage the young people. Okay, so we can redo it, even in a modern way. Maybe you don't have to go to the theater, or you can just have some plays in your cell phone and record it and broadcast it. So we're trying to revive this kind of art that we lost, unfortunately, in our village, and that is that what trigger us to follow this community theater.
That's so interesting. And you've already highlighted music as an important element of Nubian theater. What are other important elements? And can you tell us a little bit more also about like the music, the dance, like how that works together?
Okay, I think I can speak from my division Nubian, because we have three divisions: in Tajiki, Kinzi, and Arab. So I think I can tell you about Tajiki. Like one of our famous dances in Tajik, area is called Aragid. Like we have some when the people just dance in lines, and it's very easy. And like one step right, one step to the left. But we have like other sophisticated dances like fairy, and fairy is the name of a fish. And in this dance, like you have a woman and against one man, and the woman uh, do some dances or do some moves that mimicking this fish in the night. So it is kind of the impact that you have from your surrounding, from your landscape, because the River Nile was like, I think it was a backbone for our culture. So all of our tradition was connected to the Nile, and I think the impact of losing this landscape, losing the connection of the Nile, was a huge and like very big on the Nubian identity, not just the Nubian uh, landscape, but even the Nubian individual, our elder generation, like maybe Nabra know about this, like they couldn't survive in the new home because they lost the connection of with the Nile. So speaking again about fairy, so I think fairy is one of the most or the most famous dance in our division in Fajeka. I think in Matuki they have some other dances with huge drums. I think it's called Holy Holy. Um, more more intense than ours, I think. Yeah.
And of course, all of these elements, from what I understand, are incorporated into any theater piece in Nubia because often they deal with issues or conversations that are happening in the villages and among the community. Can you talk more about what topics that you heard from the people who were making theater in the villages? What topics did they cover in the sketches and in the pieces? What were some themes that you learned about in a lot of Nubian theater?
The beginning of the Nubian theater in original Nubia, it was around 20s of the last century, and it started with the scouts. I don't know the reason, but the Nubian villages were pioneers in scouts inside Egypt, and even the first scouts of the kingdom when Egypt was a monarchy regime was a Nubian. So the scouts inside the villages were so good, and they started this kind of shows, this kind of performance inside the village in original Nubia. And they were just like the performance were just so simple. The audience came in circles, and the actors entering in the middle of this circle and start to perform. Um, most of them, I think, it was a comedy. They were mocking the problems because even before the last displacement, we lost most of the land when the first dam was built. So even if you didn't like move exactly like entirely from original land, but you lost your income by lost your land, and that's why like most of Nubian men starting from 20s until 60 had to move to big cities like Cairo or Alexandria to work or to provide them families back in original Nubia. And I think like the topics were just like the lack of land and how families miss the provider who is working like in big cities like Cairo and trying to make it like as bearable as they can for them to have some comic show or to have this kind of comedy performance. in the village in order to make it like much easier for them to continue living in such circumstances.
What about Nubian theater in Cairo and other big cities? Like after you were talking a little bit about how it was in Nubia and then how it also spread to the new cities. Um,
Uh, okay, the Nubian community theater in Cairo was just formed by like with actors. Like back in this time, we had some Nubian actors that like acting in some roles that stereotyping. Nabra as a janitor or a doorman, or and like if you watch it, old Egyptian movies, you always have some Nubian man that people are making fun of him because he's black and he's speaking some like different language. So the people who were like doing these roles in the Egyptian cinema, they formed some kind of theater band, and I think they called it the modern Nubian Sudanese band, and like uh, in the opposite of the roles, the kind of roles that they are acting in the cinema, they were acting like they have some kind of uh, international plays, like plays that was written by Oscar Wilde or Nikolai Gogol or other respective like playwriters in this time. So I think they were trying to put in a statement that we are more than like this black men who are you making fun of it in the movies. And I think the one, the most famous one of this group was called Ni'ma Hussein. I need to check the name one more time. Yeah, Hosna Salama. Okay, and she was known as a character called Ishta in most of the movies in this time, and she even like wrote a letter to the acting syndicate in Egypt, claiming that you need to give people of color or Nubians more rules than the stereotype rules that you are giving us. So that is a community, that is a theater that was formed by the actors, the Nubian actors in Cairo and Alexandria. But unfortunately, we don't have like such solid information for how long this community theater was playing. And
Around when was this? Was this like the 1950s or 60s?
yeah, I think it is around 40s to 50s. Yeah, yes, 40s. I think it lasted for maybe 5 years because like most of these actors like didn't had like very long career acting. So I think yeah, it lasted for like 4 years, maybe five maximum. I'm not sure, but I'm estimating.
That's incredible. I had never heard about this group. And this was also before the flood in the 60s. So already Nubian theater was happening. Uh, and there were even movements associated with it in Cairo. And then I know that you've talked to me about the Abu Simbel theater because, of course, I'm from Abu Simbel. And that happened. Can you tell us about Abu Simbel theater and what that looked like again before and after the flood?
Before the flood, like we have so we have a few of like the notable names that were in charge of the community center, like Mickey Shalaw Alintu, who was like so famous back then in Abu Simbel, Abdu Malaka, Hussein Omda, Ahmed Nouri. These names are the one who were like who built the community theater back in original Nubia. And some of them continued to do the same in Tahgir or in the displacement villages. And for sure, the situation and the circumstances in the displacement village were even much harder because, as I told you before, that we lost the connection with the line. Um, the place was just it is not like figure speaking. It was just literally in the middle of the desert. So the weather was so hard on the people. Um, a lot of babies were lost. I think we have a cemetery called the kindergarten cemetery because we lost um, all the people, the newborn, especially the people who was born in '64. So 6 years later, we didn't have a class one or a grade one in schools because most of the people who supposed to join school by this day were died already. Uh, Due to this circumstances that they faced in Tahrir or in displacement village. So the problems were like more severe in the new place. Um, a completely lack of infrastructure. The housing is not suitable for the Nubian life. There is no opportunity for jobs. So like another part of Nubians had to move once again to urban cities like Cairo in Egypt in order to provide families back in Nubia. So this escalated and like escalated the need for having a community theater because it was a kind of when you have a problem that it is just over your head and you can't deal with it, you need to lay off your anger in something protected. And that is why the Nubians recreated the community center once again in the new place, El Tahir. And they were dealing with such problems like the housing and the lack of the Nile, and how the houses become very tiny, like don't like the other houses or the original houses of Nubia, because you know that the original Nubian house is just like maybe 1,000 feet square or maybe even bigger. But recent houses that we moved to, it's just more like cubicle comparing to the other house. So these problems came with a new topics that people need to discuss in the community theater. And after a while, like people starting to move not even for cities like Cairo or Egypt, but to the Gulf area in order to provide and for sure the financial circumstances in Gulf area is better than Egypt. So we are dealing with this kind of alienation most of the time because you don't have like in every house in Nubia you have at least one person who's away, and that is like so destructive in our community because Nubians always like a close community. So when you have like a member of your family is away for 2 years and he just came for vacation for 1 month, so all of these problems ignite the thoughts of the people who are in charge of the community to come up with new new topics and new problems to address in a comedy way also. So even like you are dealing with tragedies, but you put it in like a very light comic way.
And so is that how Abu Simbel Theatre started as well? Was that in the displacement villages? Uh, you told me about a physical theater space as well that was doing sketches quite consistently for a while, especially in the 90s.
Yes, I think the place, the community theater was built in 1984. Okay, it was built by the government, and by 1984, it means 20 years after the displacement. Okay, so during this time, like people used any open area to perform, but there was actual a place called the Village Theater was built like 20 years after, and it was awarded by the government because Abu Simbel have some folklore band and like Abu Simbel is known for art, and they take the first position in a national way. So the folklore band of Abu Simbel won the first place inside Egypt, and as a reward for that, the government built this theater in the village of Abu Simbel. And even like you can call the people who are acting in this community, they are not pros. You just amateur. They are just loving to act and love to make the people laugh. But what I know by doing the documentary is that this community here in some time you have to pay to enter this to play, and the people are so happy to pay like I think 25 piastre, which was like a money by this time, and the parents were encouraging the young kids to join the theater and like to acting like and it is a completely opposite because in Egypt, like if you have a kid in school and he trying to do some activity like acting, like most parents will know, okay, go and study, leave this, and it's like you have to pay more attention to your study. But in our case, in the Nubian community, the parents were encouraging them kids to join such activities, such acting in the community center, and that was fascinating because our surrounding in Tahgir, like the Nubian community is surrounded by non-Nubian community, most of them Said or Arab, and like acting or singing is not like very. It's not very popular among them, like especially acting, maybe singing because yeah, singing like all of the communities are singing, but acting wasn't like very popular, even like till today. So you have some people who are doing um, such performing and such artistic uh, act in the middle of the desert in some rural area as a swan that was so strange and amazing in the same way because like in Egypt you have the artistic activities just it is just for the cities, big cities. So if you have a community here in a place like Aswan who is like 1,000 kilometer away from Cairo, that is fascinating.
Yeah, and so exciting as well. I wish I could have seen, some of the theater when that theater existed, but it closed in the was it in the late '90s, and why did it end, that particular theater, and what does theater look like today in Nubia, as far as you know?
Um, as I told you, like after a while, people like there is a lack of job opportunities in the place that we were thrown at. So these young kids, like they grow up and they need to provide as a family. So most of them move to Gulf area or to big cities like Cairo and Alexandria, and our community became like you know that if you are a student in Nubia, you know that after you are graduated from college, you're gonna leave this place because there is nothing to do in this place. And when you have a lack of youth in your community, I think most of your life is fading away. Like you don't have people to play football, you don't have people to add because who's still in the village? Just old people and young kids. While the youth are just like moving from city to city, from country to country in order to provide. So I think that is the reason why it is much abandoned right now. That is the reason why people start to acting in the community center, and that is why it was failed. And I forget to mention that after 10 years, I think, no, after another 20 years, the government demolished the community, the theater in Abu Simbel, in order to reconstruct it, but it was just demolished and never like rebuilt again. So uh, you back to the 60s. Like you don't have any other place to act. You don't have people to act. So I think that is the reason why we stopped, or an assembly we stopped to have such a community setup. But to be honest, I think uh, in maybe in some occasions like schools concerts where you have just a play written for this occasion, but like a continuous community theater inside the village, I think it does not exist anymore.
Yeah, I know that my cousin everyone's a cousin. There are so many cousins, and they're the only people doing everything because all of us are cousins. But my cousin Isra Saleh is trying to start a community theater or a continuous program for youth at Kuruma Cultural Center right now, which I'm very excited about. Do you know about any other initiatives that are, working towards revitalizing the arts and theater and performing arts in the villages?
I think Roma's project is the only one who's working, and it's a good thing to have people who are like willing to recreate the community theater. By the way, Kroma is in the city of Aswan, so we are hopefully, or through Nubian Geographic, we are hopefully will be in some way trying to recreate the community center once again in Tahrir, because Aswan and Tahrir are like two different places. But for sure, it's a very important step and huge one to have uh, to create a band or to create a community theater in Chroma project, which is very promising project. And we know the people who are in charge, Sharif or Zizu Tag, the composer and singer. They are actually our friends, so we are like very optimistic. And inshallah, when they done with the first class, I think we're gonna have at least a group of 20 kids, maybe 30 kids who are acting or singing or composing music, which will for sure add like a lot of value for the Nubian culture, because uh, they are dealing with kids in young age, and I think that is a typical age to grow up an artist. So we are very optimistic for this project, and hopefully we'll get it. And we're gonna, I think, they also teaching music. If I am not wrong, it's not just the acting. So it is acting and playing instruments and music. So it is very promising project, and very excited to see the people who is come gonna graduate from this project.
Yes, I'm so excited, and, yeah, all the people in charge are so incredible. I say that also because they're my family, but also because they are such incredible artists and have such perseverance and really have a big vision to revitalize the arts, in Aswan, and I'm so excited to hear that Nubian Geographic is working or, has a vision towards revitalizing the arts in the villages as well, so we're really looking forward, inshallah, to seeing that. And of course, to see the documentary that is coming out this next month. Uh, do you have a name for the documentary, yet? And how can people see it or keep up with the news of what Nubian Geographic is doing?
We have a national name. It's called Teatro Farig. Farig is the original name for Abu Simbel. Okay, so Teatro Farig is the national name, but I think we're gonna consult the people of Farig first to come with this name, because we are just putting the people on the screen, but they did all the work. Like they are the people who are most important than us. Uh, we're just a tool, or we're just a way to put them work into the a larger audience. But the I think Theatre of Farage is initial name, and maybe it will be the last name.
Lovely. Well, we'll look out for that, of course. And how can we follow you and everyone can keep up with Nubian Geographic? What's the best way to do that?
I think it's through our Facebook page. Uh, we will have some kind of announcement when the documentary is done. We'll have two screenings events, one in Aswan and other one in Cairo, because like a lot of people moved to Cairo, so we need to communicate with the Nubian community also in Cairo. And for sure, it will be in our YouTube channel after the screening. So yeah, keep tracking our Facebook. I think is the best way to know when exactly the documentary will be launched.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us. I learned so much, and I'm so excited about the work that you're doing.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mazen.
Thank you, Nabra, for having me. Thank you, Marina, for having me. It was a great opportunity, and I like your podcast. I was talking to Nabra areas that I was like listening to some of your episodes before, and it is great opportunity to me to be one of your guests. So thank you again. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It's our honor. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. This was amazing. This podcast is produced as a contribution to HowlRound Theatre Commons. You can find more episodes of Kunafa and Shay and other HowlRound podcasts by searching HowlRound wherever you find podcasts. If you loved this podcast, please post a rating and write a review on your platform of choice. This helps other people find us. You can also find a transcript for this episode, along with a lot of other progressive and disruptive content on the HowlRound.com website. Have an idea for an exciting podcast, essay, or TV event the theater community needs to hear? Visit HowlRound.com and contribute your ideas to the Commons.
Yalla, bye.